well, it is sort of rocket science. It is science, but so basically, if you have high communication apprehension, that is, you don't tend to disclose too much. You might, um, you know, use more CMC. It just sort of depends. There's a thing on page 86 again. Individuals high communication apprehension perceive that they disclose less information overall, disclose more negative information, or less honest and self-disclosing individuals with low communication apprehension. Right. So okay, whatever. So people, so people who have high self or high communication apprehension don't disclose as much, generally. And some of that stuff is usually more negative. People with low communication apprehension will disclose more information because they're not apprehensive about that. So the main point here, again, I'm getting, or I already said that, is this. Blah, blah, blah. It is important to study online self-disclosure and face-to-face relationships where CMC channels are used in relational maintenance because deviations from established models are likely to change how self-disclosure functions in these hybrid relationships. That's what they're called, hybrid relationships. It's both CMC and face-to-face. It's hybrid. Self-disclosure may be hindered by a sense of self-consciousness, anxiety, reticence, or unwillingness to communicate, or it may be a communication strategy employed to overcome these, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Describe 3 dimensions of self-consciousness, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't matter. Social self-consciousness, somewhere, whatever. So basically, yeah. Okay, so you don't want it to be hindered. So highly reticent individuals are more likely to use, this is where I had my little thing, my little star on the wrong place. So highly reticent individuals are more likely, again, highly reticent means I don't want to give you information, are more likely to use instant messaging rather than converse face-to-face, as it enables a greater sense of situational control and reduction of inhibition and anxiety and allows for opportunities to prepare messages in advance. I'm a very shy, nervous person, so I'd rather use CMC instant messaging to convey stuff than face-to-face. Yeah, that's it. All right. Finally, the relationship I've been trying to get to between communication apprehension and CMC. And so basically, theoretically, what they're saying is that we need a new concept because CA, or communication apprehension, has always been just for face-to-face stuff. Now we need what they call CMCA, or computer-mediated communication apprehension. And to see, what happens, because even as we have that research there, and it's sort of a no-brainer that if we're sort of face-to-face and nervous about it, then we want to convey it CMC. But there are some folks who have computer anxiety in the first place. So they talk about computer anxiety, fear of impending interaction with a computer that is disproportionate to the actual threat presented by the computer. I mean, sometimes look at this keyboard. I'm gonna get you. But people have computer anxiety. I remember I had to, when I was a kid, I just slowly worked myself up to facing the fear I had of Atari. But I finally got to play Pac-Man. So people do have, anxiety over computers generally, and computer-mediated communication. I'm scared of computers. It's going to get me. Fewer nonverbal cues in CMC, obviously, so we try to use emoticons, and sometimes, because of that, people are fearful of that, but, so obviously we use emoticons, and a lot of this stuff is basically just telling us we need more information about this. But another cool term here is, and I have never figured out how to actually pronounce this, telephony. Telephony? Sounds like a type of breakfast sandwich. Telephony. No, or pasta. Telephony. Telephony. You want the telephony? I want the telephony. Telephony. Tasty. Or telephony. Is that telephony? Phony? So basically, it's this idea we're relating this to communication apprehension, that if you have high communication apprehension, that is, you might, for instance, break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend on the phone instead of person, because it's easier to do that, or a letter. You can't face people face to face. You got to do something else. And we also know nowadays people will break up with people through a text or an email. I don't like you no more. And that whatever emoticon that you might choose that says the relationship is over and done. But in any case, so we don't really know how to predict if folks will, what folks will do with CMC in light of communication apprehension. But more studies need to be done to gauge issues of computer anxiety and anxiety or apprehension in a CMC context. But long story short, and this is on the top of page 89, a lot of stuff from Spitzberg and Kupik. So basically, in the case of shy, reticent, or apprehensive individuals, they may be motivated to employ CMC channels as a means of managing the interaction of their uncertainties simultaneously, whereas the selection of face-to-face interaction is more threatening. CMC users were found to be more likely to choose these CMC channels where they anticipated positive results from the channel used. So if I'm going to receive more positive results doing this via Facebook than face-to-face, I'm going to do it Facebook. Underlying one's skills and motivations, persons must possess knowledge of the appropriate skills to employ given the nature of the goals and the demands of the situation. Yeah, of course, you don't know how to text. You can't. However, the various ways in which the communication competence model may apply to CMC interactions need support. There's a very limited research exists. Yes, okay. So, basically, again, we pick the channels that we think are going to make us feel better about ourselves, and that's going to bolster our or support our self-concept, bolster our self-esteem. So, basically, the end stuff of all this, CMCA and channel selection. Online communication, they argue, can generally reduce anxiety for folks who do have a lot of anxiety communicating face-to-face. Research shows that folks who have very high communication apprehension tend to form more online relationships because they might have trouble forming relationships face-to-face. High communication apprehension folks tend to like online communication more so than face-to-face communication. Folks with high communication apprehensions might fulfill interpersonal needs online more so than face-to-face, because again, it's difficult for them to do it face-to-face. And then high communication apprehension folks might or are likely to disclose more personal information via CMC than face-to-face. It's really interesting information. So, explanations for all these. Some people say, even though it might be counterintuitive, depends on the situation, that mediated channels, CMC, oftentimes feel safer, in part because of the ambiguity and all that, and you're not there face-to-face, right? So there's not as many limited, or there's limited nonverbal cues. You're not if you disclose something, you won't automatically see somebody in front of you go. And you can read the stuff on the top of page 90, but blah 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 blah. I'll let you read it, but. Second explanation is that we pick certain communication channels in light of our self-perceived competencies. That is, I'm good at this. Might not have communication apprehension, but I know I'm not terribly good when it comes to small talk, and so I'm going to do stuff via CMC in this situation. So think about what you're good at, and then do that. All right. So the big conclusions, shy folks like CMC. That's pretty much it. It's not always the case, and nothing is ever always the case, but that's generally the idea. I do like the buffering idea, and that's generally the idea that they buffer one another. Um, self-conception, self-perception, communication competence is not mutually exclusive. Basically, I mean, we go back and forth. If we feel, if CMC allows us to be more comfortable about certain things, then that might impact how we feel face to face. If face to face, and we feel comfortable there. I mean, it goes back and forth. And so that's sort of the idea. For example, it says if you don't like to give public speeches, perhaps offering your ideas online will give you confidence in more face-to-face settings. That's the point. They interact with one another. They buffer one another. They I can't find exactly where all this stuff is, but the idea is that generally we don't want to be apprehensive. To have strong, intimate relationships, we need to disclose. And a lot of people who have high apprehensiveness do not disclose. And that might limit the ability to have a intimate relationship with another person or others. So CMC is great in that capacity, but also there is that interaction between the two where lessons learned from CMC can be taken to face-to-face, and lessons learned face-to-face can be taken to CMC, and they all blur and work together. I don't know. I mean, it'd be really interesting to see if somebody's confidence was boosted through CMC, and then that impacted one's confidence in face-to-face. Or vice versa. Who knows? Maybe somebody's really confident face-to-face, but they get online and they say stupid things, and that impacts how they feel back and forth. Who knows? In any case, this actually might be a good place to put that extra thing that I found about Trump's use of Twitter. Then I think he says the same stuff really face-to-face and CMC. But take a look at that video because I think it's really, really interesting. But that's it. That's all I have for you on this delightful Saturday on Chapter 5. I look forward to reading your papers. Have a delightful, it's going to be a beautiful day. Go out and enjoy the weather. Take care.